Welcome to the Fabricators Coach podcast, where we believe that every fabricator deserves to have a business that not only makes the money, but also gives them time to enjoy it. In each episode, our goal is to share real information that you can take action on and use today. Information that, if you will use it, can help you reduce the chaos in your business, help you make more money, and help you get your life back. This particular podcast was created from a live recording of a previous webinar. In order to protect the confidentiality of the attendees, we've gone in and redubbed some of the questions and cut out some of the conversation. All right. So first, welcome. What we're going to do is a review of our March article in the Sleepy Rock Gazette. As those of you who have attended before, this is more of a discussion, more of a conversation than it is a presentation. For those of you who don't know me, my background, I've got over 40 years experience in manufacturing and business ownership and coaching. I've worked literally with hundreds of companies in a lot of different industries, including this one. I've owned my own brick and mortar business. And so those of you who are owners, I can understand how lonely that is at times. I've coached a number of fab shop owners over the last 20 years. And I ran a countertop shop for a few years. So I know where a lot of you are now and a lot of the challenges that you're dealing with. So that's just a quick thumbnail sketch on my background. So our objective, the reason I have these webinars, I write these articles and I have these webinars to try to give you a structure to begin working on your business. I think that the more that you work on your business instead of just working in it, then the more you're going to improve your business. The more that you do that, the closer you get to having a business that not only makes you money, but also gives you time to enjoy it. Because I really think, honestly, that you deserve that. I think it's important if you're a business owner to think about how to stop being your most expensive employee. Now, you probably noticed that we're recording this session. What we do is we convert the audio from these webinars into podcasts. So you can go back and listen to them. If you go to Fabricators Coach podcast on any of your podcast platforms, you can pick these up. And for those of you who are worried, I do sometimes have people who will slip up and say something that maybe they don't want their boss to hear. So we do go back and edit those out. We're very sensitive to that. Don't want to get anybody in trouble. So those will be available for you to listen to. All right. So this article for this month was Batten down the hatches. You can go to slipperyrockgazette.net and get a copy of it, select the current issue, and it'll show up there. Or you can go to our website, fabricatorscoach.com, and select blog, and you can download this article plus many others that are out there. So I'm wondering, how many of you are already seeing a slowdown in sales volume and or quote volume and or maybe showroom traffic? Victor, you guys still running strong?
I would say that I can see a little bit of slowdown in, basically B2C or residential jobs. Or I would say it takes a little bit longer for the people to kind of decide right now. So we could be measuring and quoting the jobs on the regular basis, but not all of them, going into like production as quick, I guess, as it would be like last year in like B2B with the contractors and builders. I think so far, we're pretty much on the same level. But overall, yeah, I would say that it looks like there is a little bit of a slowdown.
Okay, good deal. Dan, you guys seeing any slowdown, or are things pretty well rocking along for you guys?
Yeah, we've been pretty fortunate. We're, pretty consistently moving along. I think we put money in different places, 6 months ago to help anticipating some slowdown. So, but just as I'm learning this industry, I'm realizing that one day it could go from feast to famine pretty quick. So, so we're pretty fortunate. We've so far so good this year. A little better than we maybe forecasted that we would do, but certainly not counting our chickens before they hatch per se.
Yeah, can understand that for sure. Anybody else have a comment? Anybody else seeing any changes at all?
We do both commercial and residential work. Commercially is definitely on the uptick in Denver. We have seen a pretty big drop off in our showroom traffic since the first of the year. Normally we would attribute that to the holidays, but it just hasn't really picked up like it has in past years yet.
Yeah, we're seeing folks I work with across the country seeing really a mixture of results. I've got a client in Central Texas, and they're just booming like crazy for a number of reasons. I've got clients other parts of the country that are not doing quite as well. Some market segments are doing really well, and some are slow. You see that Celio Stoltz is on the call. I talked to him at Tice last month. They do a lot of commercial work. And when you look at the economic cycles, residential tends to kind of be on the front end of the economic cycle. So if you're having a downturn, you typically feel it there first. The commercial stuff, because of the long lead times, permitting, financing, planning that goes into those, they tend to kind of trail that business cycle. So I think those are pretty typical. I've got one client I was working with that got a few phone calls during 1 week in December, and he lost 40% of his business in 1 week because all of his production builders just turned the light switch off because of interest rates. But then I've heard of other clients in other areas that are actually going out and getting more production builder work. So I think there are just lots of different factors. It's not an even overall impact for everybody. I think it varies a lot. So I think you just got to watch your own area and see what's going on. When you look at challenges like this, where things are up and down, things are uncertain, you're not really sure what next week or next month's going to bring. There are two pretty common responses to that. One is that real conservative, pull in your horns, cut costs, batten down the hatches kind of approach. And the other is to get really aggressive and figure out how to go out and take advantage of the opportunities that are going to be out there. Because those of you who have been through recessions and downturns before know that there are going to be opportunities out there. So our session today, we're going to talk about that first most common reaction, which is pulling in your horns, batting down the hatches, kind of getting ready to weather the storm, so to speak. Future articles, future webinars over the next few months, we'll talk about that more aggressive approach and what some of those activities might look like. So now let's get in kind of the details here. Let's talk about how we batten down the hatches and some of the decisions and some of the actions we may want to take. And the first most common one is control costs. And that's all if I can eliminate this cost, can the business still function? I recommend to folks grab your P&L statement, your profit and loss statement, and start walking down through there and question everything that's there and say, okay, if I pull this cost out, can the business still function? If you're not sure, you might try it temporarily. If you can't eliminate it, maybe you can reduce it a little bit. That's something to think about there. What are some typical costs that some of you would sit down and look at if you were forced with having to really start to cut your costs to keep your business in decent shape during a downturn? Celio, what kind of things would you look for?
I apologize. The little one woke up. Hey, can you hear me, Ed?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Right now, actually, because of the ups and downs, we're still going strong. We have a couple of large contracts, but through the ups and downs, we got to get more diligent in, unfortunately, furloughing a few people, right? Because right now we're a little down. But besides that, keeping an eye every day, every week on those processes, on how long it's taking to load trucks, leave to the job site, plan the fabrication and installation sequence so we can get the most out of those trips. We're in the San Francisco Bay Area, just so you have an idea. Plus California labor loss, our guys start the work in the shop, right? And we account for about a couple hours driving only, which adds a lot of labor into our. So we got to watch those details a lot.
Okay. Other than labor, are there any specific costs that you guys have taken a look at, maybe either eliminating or reducing?
No, we've been doing that for about a year now, and right now, well, it's probably most people have noticed that all materials went up quite a bit, and we've cut everything we could so far, actually.
Okay. Good. Dan, you guys, I know, do a good job of planning and execution because of your previous life. What type of cost would you guys take a look at to see if you can eliminate them or reduce them other than labor cost?
Yeah, we haven't found too many to eliminate. One of the things that we did, different advertising streams that we were using, if we weren't getting a benefit out of them, we wouldn't eliminate them, but we'd reallocate in places that we were getting a larger benefit from. So I think we had probably 4 or 5 different ways that we were trying to generate leads and things, and we streamlined those down to get a better ROI on those. So that's the first thing. The other thing that's helped us out a lot is expenses like shop supplies. Obviously, you can't eliminate those; you need those. But we, I think, when we were extremely busy the previous 2 to 3 years, we were buying shop supplies just. What do we need? Hurry up, buy them, bring them in, throw them on the shelf and go. And that's fine during that time. But as things tighten up a little bit, we're probably more focused on the things that we purchase and leave on the quote shelf until we actually absolutely need them, or right before we absolutely need them. So just by doing things like that, we've been able to trim down a lot of our, our cash that we would have in our pockets, as opposed to sitting on a shelf in the form of, whatever it could be, things that we need. So that's just paying attention to those things has actually allowed us to cut that cost by about 20% per month, just by ordering what we need, and as opposed to always being prepared and stocked like we're, a grocery store. We kind of pivoted that to more on demand of our need, and that's helped us a lot. So that's probably the biggest one that, jumps out in my mind, and making sure that we're we're not just frivolously wasting or letting some of our money or cash sit in the form of other things that's not generating anything for us.
I think it's a great observation. You think about what's happened the last few years, everybody pretty well experienced just a huge surge in demand with shutdowns and all the remodels that went on, and people moving from urban to rural areas, and some new construction. Then we had supply chain issues where it was tough to get things. So you ordered, whenever you had something available, you went ahead and bought it. Didn't matter as much what the price was. So I think that's a great observation, that now if you're looking at uncertain economic times, getting really intentional about, okay, so when do I let somebody get a new set of pads, on a polisher? How long can I make this saw blade last before I start having productivity problems and quality problems and CNC tooling and the whole 9 yards, everything that's consumable. So certainly tracking those shop supplies and those consumables is a great way to look at costs. Anybody got any other cost categories other than labor? Because we'll talk about labor here in just a minute. Anybody got any cost categories other than labor that you would normally look at during a time like this?
Well, I would say we have, let's say, a part of the budget going towards the Google ads. So I would say probably this time I would review how well it's working, and basically what actually, it brings in, and then have to
Victor, I think we lost you.
see if it's something, well, like you said, maybe, if weather has any impact.
Yeah. And that's pretty common. When sales slow down, people stop spending money on advertising a lot of times. They see that as a variable expense that they can start to reduce. Other things people look at are company cell phones. How many do you really need? Can you go back and renegotiate maybe some of the plans on those phones and get those costs down a little bit? When you look at memberships and organizations, I'm a big fan of the industry organizations that we've got. I think there's a lot of value there. But when you start looking at the thousands of dollars that some of these have, can you shift that membership from one organization to another that maybe doesn't have quite as expensive a cost? Maybe you decide to kind of sit it out for a year or two. Those are things to be considered as well, because the real question is, if I eliminate this cost, or if I reduce it, is it going to have a significant negative impact on how well I run the business? And I think that's kind of the mindset that I would recommend you use as you start to look at all these different costs. I mentioned going down the P&L, looking at line item by line item. I think it's even more effective a lot of times. Just take the stack of payables that you've got, your stack of invoices that you receive for bills you've got to pay, and start looking at each line item in each one of those. Just take some time every week to just spend an hour looking at them. You won't get through all of them necessarily the first week, but spend some time watching those and start to question, how can I manage this? So that's a pretty common approach in an economic downturn. Something that you all have already kind of mentioned is this next category, and that's preparing to lay off employees. One of the things I recommend to folks, and of course, I think Celio mentioned they'd already maybe done some layoffs. Nobody really wants to do any layoffs, but when things get tight and you look at your big expense categories, you can't do with less slabs unless maybe you can reduce your inventory a little bit, but you got to buy slabs in order to make countertops. If you don't have as many orders, you're not making as many countertops, maybe you don't need as many employees. And so as tough as it's been to hire good people lately, there's always, in organizations, there's always one or two people that maybe aren't your top performers. This is a good time to take some time and decide, do you want to let these folks hang around, or maybe is it time to help them find a new work address? Dan, I see that you unmuted. Did you have a comment?
No, I was just going to kind of add something too. As you were talking, one of the things that really stuck out to me about the cost control is because we've talked about this a lot, and obviously we don't want to lose anybody, people. So we decided that we're going to look at all other avenues and keep our employment level at the same that it is, just because we like our team and feel a little bit of sense of duty towards them. So one of the things that we did is we looked at, especially right now, and for everybody on the call, I'm sure their biggest cost is material, just slabs and things like that. So while we didn't do anything new, we probably over the past 6 months, we've paid more attention to what our percentage of material usage is per job, and creative ways for our team to be able to be better at using less material on the jobs that we're doing. So, and that's helped us so much over the past 6 months, and it didn't cost anybody a role or a job. We just kind of focused on things like that. That's such a big expense for all of us that we were able to save a ton of money just by getting some kind of tracking and metrics, and our programmer just talking to him about how we're doing and giving him numbers, and he's pretty specific and a little anal too about things. So he's a perfect person for that job. And every month we talk about it. He's like, what's my score and the percentage? And it's helped us reduce that just in the past year. Gosh, we've reduced it 6 or 7 percentage points, which is straight to our bottom line. And it's helped us a lot. And as the business owner, I feel really good about that versus the easy quick of laying off people. And certainly that's part of this. I understand that. But before that, we really focused on that. And that helped us a lot, where even if we figured out, if we reduce our revenue by 30 to 40%, we still can keep our people that we have. We just did this week, and that makes everybody feel really good. The owners, at least. I know it did me. Of not having gone through that so many damn times in the past. It's nice not to have to bring that into the into the recipe. So Sorry, just something to add, Ed, that I think it's helped us, and certainly I learned that because I'm brand new to this. I don't know this industry, so it became really apparent to us, and hopefully that helps somebody else on the call.
It's a great comment. Thank you. What are the you mentioned tracking some metrics. What are some of the metrics that you're tracking, Dan, that you feel are effective as you try to manage material usage?
Yeah, so we figured out we have certain builders and jobs that we use that it's inevitable on what we can do or can't do with some of the material. I mean, sometimes we're going to be higher percentage than we want to be, but what we took away from that is we figured out a way to be able to use remnants and that kind of thing. And the way that we structured our shop allowed us to, it was easier for us to use partial slabs and things like that on jobs, on mass, builder jobs. And that helped us out a lot. So we just started doing this about 3 months ago. We've been tracking it, but we're starting to share it with our team, every job and what percentage of material slabs we use to the revenue. And we show our team now. And And we talk about, hey, low percentages aren't always good. Most of the time they are, but not always. And high percentages aren't always bad. Most of the time they are, but not always. So that so we go through each individual job and look at, hey, how do we do here? What stuck out? Do we have to remake? And those kinds of things. And we've brought just attention to how many slabs are cutting, but more importantly, the mistakes that happen in any of this. It seems it's inevitable, but everybody knows about it. So instead of taking a hammer to their heads with it, people are talking about ways to prevent them from, or recuts, and everybody knows that, oh shoot, we had a recut, this is going to affect that, and they see a bigger picture. And so kind of all of those things together, we talk about them as a crew, and the output of that meeting is, what do we need to do to prevent it from happening next time? And like I said, we've trimmed a lot of percentages off just a revenue of, or excuse me, the percentage of material that we're cutting. So just something as easy as that has really helped us, and sharing it with appropriate people has really, really helped us.
Great thoughts all around. Those of you who may be interested, one of the things I see as I look at financials for companies I work with is when you take your material cost as a percent of sales, if you're looking at retail sales, just kind of as a benchmark, it'll vary for your B2B, obviously. But on retail sales, a typical benchmark these days is roughly materials being roughly about 30% of sales. 35 is not too bad. If you find that it's creeping up towards 40, you're probably not raising your prices enough. You get it down below 30, you're doing great. I have seen some folks down in the mid-20s. That's unusual. It's also not unusual to walk into a new client, start doing the analysis and find out that their materials is running 40, 50% of sales. And what that tells me is, as they've gotten material price increases, they've not kept up with their sales pricing as it relates to that. So that's another area to kind of look at. One thing I am hearing and talking with folks these days is, obviously freight costs are starting to come back down to something more reasonable out of the stratosphere they were in not long ago. I'm hearing, and I've not verified this, so take this with a grain of salt, but I'm hearing from a couple of folks that apparently the distributors have placed a lot of orders for material, especially out of Brazil. And apparently there are a lot of ships on the water. There's a lot of stone on the water getting ready to hit the States. And it sounds like there may be a good opportunity for picking up material at a lower cost here in the near future. So don't know if that's true or not. Keep your ears open. If you think about maybe doing a buy on some material, push for some negotiations a little bit, maybe some opportunities there for you. So appreciate you bringing that up, Dan. It's a great point. Let's talk about the thing that we all hate to do, and that's lay off employees. What I like to recommend for folks, and Dan and I both have worked for large corporations in the past, and that's usually one of the first things that large companies do is things start looking slow, the forecast starts getting light, they immediately start cutting heads. And that's one of the reasons that we're very reluctant to do this as a first move. But I think it's important now, before you get in the heat of battle, to put together your game plan. If things get bad enough and you've got to start reducing that cost, because after materials, your next biggest cost is typically labor, then it's a good time to make the plans now before you actually have to, because we're in the heat of battle. emotions run high, there's frustration, you're already under a lot of stress because the business is struggling. That's not the time to make those kind of decisions. Make them now while you've got some time to think through them with a clear head. And what I mean is, think about at what sales level do you need to start doing that reduction. Decide who goes first and why. One of the things that can be a big help, and this is a more of a help to large companies, but still can be a benefit to smaller companies too, is something called a skills matrix. In fact, if you'll hit my website, there's one there you can download for free. And what this does is on the vertical axis on the left, you list your people, and then across the top, you list the different skill sets. And then you rank the people based on their demonstrated ability with each of those skills. And you can color code that if you want to get fancy with it. But the idea is that once you've gone through a really good analysis, you step back and look and say, okay, where do I have a lot of flexibility as far as skills? I've got multiple people who know those skills. It may be fabrication. It might be, doing all the miters on porcelain. It may be your saw jet operator or whatever. People who can template and also install, or they can fabricate and they can also template, or those kind of mixes. See who the most versatile people are. See who the least versatile people are. Then take a look at that and say, okay, do I need to do some cross training now to give myself more flexibility when I do have to make a cut? Or can I take this skills matrix like it is and use that to help inform some of the decisions I may have to make about who may have to go first if I get there? So that type of analysis now, before you get in the heat of battle, I think is really important. I also think it's important to sit down and put together a specific game plan. What are those benchmarks, those milestones financially? If you're running, $300,000 a month in sales, just to pick a number, when you get down to 250, is it time to make a cut? Can you wait to 200? Sounds like Dan and his company have already made that analysis, but I think it's important to sit down and think through that so that you're not in a position where you've waited too late and now the company is in a tougher spot than it really needs to be. So I think that part's important. Another aspect of this is making your decisions on what's the severance going to be. How are you going to tell the employee? What are you going to tell them? What do you tell everybody else? And I think it's worthwhile to go sit down and kind of script all this out. Go ahead and make your plans now for what kind of message you want to present, what you want to have out there. And don't forget company property, passwords, keys, cell phones, keys to vehicles, tools, all those types of things. Make yourself a checklist. What are the things, if you have to lay somebody off, what are the things you need to make sure you get done before they leave your place for the last time? That's really important. Celio referred to California's labor laws. If you don't have somebody on staff who is really up on labor law, HR specialist, go find an HR consultant who can walk you through that, because each state's got different laws. And one of the things you don't want to do is get yourself in trouble there. So those are all things to kind of think about. It's a lot to consider, but I really recommend going through this exercise now before you get in the middle of that. Anybody, I know Celio, you said you guys had already done some of that. Anybody else who's already done some layoffs or who are maybe thinking you may have to plan for some here before too long? Any other thoughts on how to handle this? Drew, have you joined us yet? You got any thoughts?
Hey, sorry. Yeah, I'm here. I had a little audio problem earlier. So we're not approaching layoffs. We're still busy. We're in the Charlotte area and it's still going good, steady. We're even considering bringing on another salesperson right now. So, but it is good conversation to consider, especially kind of what that break-even point is where, yeah, we got to start laying off and look at drastic cuts. Like everybody agrees, layoff is the last thing you want to do, but we've been paying attention to our material, how we're using remnants, how we're using our stock materials as best. We can figure how we do that with our material manager. And then also we've gone back and redo terms with all of our vendors. So we're at least 60 days on invoices. And then also in our AR, working on collections and AR policies and going through that. So But fortunately, right now we're not looking at layoff, but it's good conversation because it's inevitable. At one point, we're gonna have to consider, making that move. But I think finding that break-even point, kind of where that is, and then who it is. We have guys that work second shift that are critical. So it's a tough discussion, but I think it's a good one to have for sure.
Okay. What do you, Drew, you said you're in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm in South Carolina. Our states are the third and fourth fastest growing states in the country right now. We're behind Texas and Florida. I forget who's 1 and 2.
Yeah.
They're the fastest growing ones. What's your forecast for your area? What do you think's coming? What do you think's going to happen the next year or two in your area?
So, same thing we've been hearing for the last year. It's like, hey, it's going to happen. It's going to slow down, but the number of people moving into the Charlotte area has not quit. The housing market has come back to a decent level. It's not as crazy, but there's still a high demand. So people are still renovating. We're in the residential remodel. We don't do a lot of commercial. So we're geared towards the upper end of the market, and it's nonstop right now. It's wild. Now, the builders we talk to, they are seeing a slowdown as far as how many people are calling. Whereas one builder told me they get 12 calls a week at the height. Now they're getting 5 or 6. But, before COVID, they were getting 3 or 4. So it's still up there, but it has come back to a normal rate.
Yeah.
And then talking to all the vendors, they're still seeing a ton of people, whether we're doing their business or not. They're still seeing a lot of people coming in their stores. So it's busy. We're not seeing a slowdown, but we're looking for it.
Yeah, I think it's just, I think in your case, a lot of it's geography too. So that's good.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other thoughts on the issue of preparing for a layoff now before you have to? All right, let's move on to the next one then. Dipping into reserve funds. This is kind of the financial piece of things. This is where I think having a written plan is really critical. Having worked on a couple of turnarounds and been through challenges like this, if you don't have a plan for how to manage your cash, your lines of credit, that sort of thing, if you don't have specific milestones lined up, it's really, really easy to kind of overshoot your runway, so to speak, to all of a sudden look up one day and you've burned through all of your cash, your lines of credit almost maxed out, and all of a sudden you're headed for a hard landing. And if you don't have a written plan, if you're not tracking those quickly or tracking those regularly, then that's a real risk that you've got. That's the kind of thing that really can kill a business. Any of you who know Aaron Crowley, he's the no-lift cart guy. He was a Fab Shop owner. He's got the Fab Lab podcast, and one of his podcasts from, I think, late last year after he sold his business, he had a few podcasts where he talked about that experience. And one of the things he talked about was after that, he talked about going through the recession and some of the challenges he had with some of the covenants he had on his lines of credit. He didn't realize that when his sales got down to a certain level, certain covenants kicked in from the bank on that agreement that he'd forgotten about, didn't realize they were there, and really caused him a lot of challenges. So if you're not familiar with that, you've got lines of credit with a lender, really good to go back and review those now before it becomes an issue. I know I've worked in businesses where the inventory was part of the value of the business. The business was heavily leveraged. And when that inventory got down below a certain point, it kicked in payments from the company that had to go back to the bank at a time when the company didn't have any cash. And so that can be a really, really tough challenge. So tracking that at least weekly, staying on top of it once a month is not nearly often enough, I don't think, especially during a downturn. So that's one of those areas that can really sneak up on you if you're not paying attention to it. Anybody got any experience with managing cash during a downturn like that? It's kind of interesting. I've got of the clients that I have, I would say a large percentage of them either bought or started their business after the Great Recession. So a lot of these folks haven't had to deal with a downturn like this. That's one of the reasons I wrote the article was in working with some of my clients, they hadn't even thought about what this looks like. So if you owned your business or you worked in the industry and were in a management position during the last recession, you're familiar with a lot of this. But if you weren't in that position during the last one, it could be a big shock.
Yeah, I'll speak up. My partner Michael was on the phone originally. We're working with, and cash management is key. Cash is key, right? And so when you said look at that cash weekly, that's incredibly important. We didn't just look at the cash weekly. We were on top of it and made some changes in accounts receivable policies. A lot of what you've talked about the things have been implemented. And so I don't think anything's more important than managing and having a cash flow report that's looked at all the time. The owner has to know where that every penny is. And it was a downturn for us for a lot of reasons last year, and that was really key to keeping the business going and growing.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I talked with some other folks from upstate New York over the last year. It sounds like upstate New York kind of hit a rough patch last year.
It did, and the biggest reason really was during the pandemic, it was impossible to get and maintain. I didn't comment on labor, but it was about having the right labor force. And that has come back. And one of the things that has been really beneficial and positive this year is a really good cross-trained team.
Good.
And we lowered.
Go ahead.
Same thing, looked at line by line at the P&L and reduced expenses everywhere that could be reduced. And the year came in well, and this year's looking good. One last thing is, a lot of the business was based on new builds. So you guys in the Carolinas are lucky. That's going to change here. So the marketing strategy is moving to really putting in a really good social media plan to talk to end users and start working with realtors more and end users and less with contractors.
Okay. So you guys are going to focus more on retail and less on B2B then?
The B2B walks in the door because it's a small town and the company has a great reputation. So the contractors know and they come in. We don't have to do a lot of marketing, but there's never been a lot of marketing to the direct to the consumer. And there's a real shortage in inventory of property to sell even. So the building is going to start slowing down new builds. And so we really need to work at those people coming in, paying cash for homes because we're near Cornell University. There's a demand for homes, and upgrading the homes. So it's really about communicating and bringing those direct consumer, business to consumer strategy.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that kind of leads into our next topic, which is tracking leading indicators. I've had a lot of folks say, well, new starts are down, but remodels are going to be up. And I kind of wonder about that because a lot of folks I know did their remodels during shutdown. But what you're saying, I think, is that you've got there because of a shortage of housing available in certain areas, that people moving into the area may be wanting to upgrade those houses. So there may still be some remodel activity in that area. Is that kind of what you're seeing?
Yeah, and also, having talked to a number of realtors, people are going to have to settle for less than their ideal purchase. And so they're actually marketing businesses that aren't the ideal, or properties that aren't the ideal property, and encouraging the buyers to buy something less than and then remodel and spend more money on upgrading because what they want is not available.
Yeah, and if you're in an area where that's happening, that's great. I would imagine in urban areas, probably not as much of that, but in more rural areas, you're probably seeing more of that just in general. And since you guys are in a small town, that may be what's part of what's driving yours, plus your proximity to a university.
Correct.
Okay. So as we talk about leading indicators, and I think maybe it was Drew that was talking a little bit about what he's seeing in Charlotte. I know in South Carolina, we've got between 200 and 400 people a day moving into the state. And North Carolina is larger than we are. So you guys maybe even have even more coming in up in Charlotte, North Carolina. But these leading indicators, I think, are really key. Obvious things that a fab shop would look at is the conversion rate, because quotes are a leading indicator for sales, obviously. But I don't see a lot of shops that are tracking that conversion rate and they're actually graphing it, both tracking the dollars and the number of orders. And so the thing I mentioned in the article is, if you're graphing this and your conversion rate is going down, the number of orders, percent of orders is going down, but your dollars is staying steady. What's that tell you about what's happening to your business? Nobody wants to take a chance on that one, huh? As you watch your conversion, go ahead.
You repeat that. The business remains steady, right? But your quote level is going down?
Well, if your number of quotes is going down, but if your quote dollars is staying steady, in other words, the conversion rate on order quantity is down, but the conversion rate on dollar quantity is steady.
While you're doing larger jobs, your pricing is going up. You're doing a better job at pricing. Perhaps your conversion rate is going up if the dollar rate's the same, but number of quotes are lower. You have a higher close rate, or you have, you've done some nice price increases.
Absolutely. I was talking with a fabricator back in December that was just really concerned about their total volume, just their level of activity, the showroom traffic, the number of quotes. And we started looking at this data, the conversion rate on number of orders and conversion rate on dollars. And they had exactly that scenario where the number of quotes was going down and the conversion on the quotes was going down, but their dollar value was staying the same. And what had happened was, and they kind of knew this, but just didn't really recognize it. But by graphing it, looking at the data, they could see evidence that the average size of job that they were running versus what they had been earlier in the year, those jobs were getting larger. And so that had a big impact on how they made decisions in the company. And obviously, if you had a scenario where your conversion rate's going down, your number of orders is going down, and your dollars are going down, that's a leading indicator that tells you may have a big problem coming, right?
Well, yeah. And the other thing I think that's important working with the sales team is we worked on upselling and, just add-ons to a sale. And also, it's easy for salespeople to throw out quotes, but they can waste a lot of time if the person walking in isn't well qualified. Sometimes, looking at who the ideal client is and just not throwing out a quote, but qualifying them better saves a lot of the salesperson's time, and that can increase the whole close rate also. And also the price per, and also the dollar volume. If you have people that are well enough trained to go out and template, and not only are you templating for what they request, but what else are you looking at in the future? Make sure you template that and then get that into your pipeline.
Definitely. And so tracking this data is really key. And then having a sales process is important. And that's part of what we'll talk about next month is the sales process. But having something that's defined, having a script, not that somebody's going to read it robotically and quote it word for word, but having things in your sales process like qualifying your prospect, make sure that if you're going to spend time with them, that they're actually somebody who might buy from you. As you look at leading indicators, how many of you use a CRM, a customer relation manager piece of software? Celio, do you guys use one?
We don't.
Okay. Dan, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say here, a cautionary tale. We have one available. Using a CRM, salespeople need to be very well trained because garbage in, garbage out. And it's easy to get a CRM really messed up. So we have it available and we're moving toward using that, but haven't used it yet.
Which one do you have?
It's actually it's available with SPS. We use SPS because we also sell tile.
Stone Profit Systems. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. All right. Dan, I know you've got a sales background from a previous life. Do you guys use a CRM?
No, we haven't made the jump to using one yet. I think it's something in our future, but we haven't done it yet just because I think I see great benefit in it, but I don't know that our team would be bought into it quite yet. And as a result, I'm not going to push that onto them. So it's I don't think we're ready to move into that world yet, but know that we need to.
Yeah, understand. And the comment we got earlier about the fact people really need to be trained well, and the process needs to be managed. One of the things I like about the CRMs that are out now is that it's not just tracking, quoting process, quote volume, quote to order conversion rate, dollars, that sort of thing. You can also start to track salesperson performance. who's responding to quote requests within the time frame that you've established, who's really and truly doing a good job of following up on those quotes. Hopefully you've got a predetermined sequence of 2 emails and a phone call, 2 phone calls and an email. We space those 2 days apart, whatever your normal sequence is. And that won't happen for every quote, but there needs to be some structure around that. You can track all that with a CRM. And one of the things I really like about them is that those of you who are doing social media marketing, doing Facebook ads, doing Google ads, you can start to track that social media engagement. You can start to track your website traffic, and that gives you an even earlier leading indicator for what quotes may be. And so CRMs can kind of help pull that together, and a true CRM can give you some good data around that, even give you some good dashboarding capability. So I think that's worth looking at just as an additional tool to use. An additional, sorry.
This is Kelly. Hey, no, a quick comment on that one. We do business to business only. And we have a hard time getting a lot of times we get a hard time getting a response from the GC if we're getting awarded or not, which makes it really hard to track our conversion rate, right? So a lot of them give us no's, yes or no's, but a lot of them we just don't hear back. And of course, that's after certain time we mark as a no. But if anyone has any suggestion on that, it would be very helpful.
Anybody got any thoughts that deals with GCs, the B2B side? Who else is doing commercial work that's got a thought on how to get an answer back from a GC?
Well, like I said, I work with a lot of GC and builders and some of the commercial projects too. Well, I know basically, let's say, number of accounts that I know for certain that all the jobs go to us. So whenever, there is a job that's coming in, like I already know that we're going to get this job because they only work with us as a fabricator. And some of the projects that, like you said, maybe you don't know or you don't get the answer from them, I just try to call them or send them a follow-up email like, hey, do you need anything else? Like, did you get the quote? Like, do you need any updates? And so what? And sometimes it did help me to basically, pull the project towards us because I was just communicating with them back and forth. And I guess for some people, it could be valuable.
Okay. Yeah. I appreciate that, Victor. This may be a good topic to kind of kick over to our half-hour follow-up because we're getting close to the top of the hour. One resource that's out there you may want to look at is a guy named Justin Shaw. He's at Stone Fabricator Elite, and he specializes a lot in the B2B relationship, and he's got some really good techniques for that. So you may want to give him a call, and I know he's got some sales webinars coming up with ISFA. If you're an ISFA member, be worth checking that out or just giving him a call because he does some webinars as well. Another leading indicator I mentioned really quick that I think is worthwhile is going to your home builder association meetings. I know that fabricators typically don't go because you don't get any work there. But if you're dealing with contractors, they're going to be contractors in those meetings. It may not be your contractors, but you can go in and have conversations like, so how many homes did you start last year? How many homes do you plan to start this year? What do you think the end of this year looks like? You can start picking their brain on what other companies that are like your customers, you can pick their brain on what they're seeing and what they're forecasting. And then also too, don't forget talking to your customers, go and asking them for what they see coming at them as far as volume this year, what their plans are and what kind of trends they're watching. Every state has got a Department of Commerce. There's a lot of information there that's going to be available. Every state's got some form of economic development. Sometimes it sits under commerce. Sometimes it's a separate nonprofit type organization that works with commerce. Your economic development people will know who's moving into your area, who's moving out. Are they likely to hire a lot of blue collar type labor? Are they going to hire a lot more office type labor? Gives you a good idea of some of these dynamics we're talking about. So those leading indicators, I think, are really important so that you got your finger on the pulse of what's coming at you in your geographic area, because that's a really, really key part. The companies that I see, the fabricators I see that do a really good job of managing their businesses, they're doing that look ahead so that they have some idea of what's coming at them so they can plan for it. About ready to wrap this up at the top of the hour. Our next article is titled "How to Close Every Prospect." It focuses on the concept that salespeople are made, not born. We'll talk about how to close the sale before you even quote. We'll look at that from a B2B side and a B2C side. I think it's important for us to understand and to acknowledge that our businesses are running exactly the way that we've designed them to run. So if you're not happy with how your business is running, I do offer a free customized assessment. Hit the website, fabricatorscoach.com, and press that button and schedule a call. Then we'll set up a time and talk through that. We've got some things coming up you may want to keep your ears out for. One is a sales mastery class, once a week, fixed fee, low price per month for the company. Really good sales training class from a master sales trainer. We've got an owner's mastermind. If you're interested in the sales class, email me and I'll get you set up with a free introductory session. Got an owner's mastermind coming up in a few months. We're still working on it. If you're interested in that, let me know. But I want to thank you all for taking some time out of your St. Patrick's Day. I hope this has been helpful for you. I hope you have a great weekend. And like I said, I'll leave this open for another 30 minutes or so if anybody wants to hang around and has any questions. So thanks, and I hope you folks have a great weekend.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Ed.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fabricators Coach podcast. If you've got any additional questions about this particular episode or anything else, please check us out at fabricatorscoach.com. Thanks. Have a great day.